She had nothing left, just a suitcase, a sketchbook, and a daughter who hadn't walked in years. He was a quiet carpenter, still grieving a past he couldn't repair. But when their paths crossed on a dusty roadside, something happened. Not loud, not dramatic, but quiet and life-changing. A tree that hadn't bloomed in years would soon witness a miracle no one saw coming. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, let's jump into the story. The sun was soft that afternoon in Windmere Bay, casting sleepy shadows across the sleepy harbor town. A few gulls circled above the pier, crying out like they knew secrets. The scent of pine and salt hung in the air, carried by the ocean breeze that swept through the town like a lazy sigh. Lyndon Burke wiped the sawdust off his hands and adjusted the wooden sign that leaned against his roadside stand. Handmade benches and chairs, made with care. He didn't write it for show. He meant it. Every piece of furniture he made carried something more than nails and wood. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was a quiet piece of himself he didn't quite know what to do with. He was a quiet man, widowed, in his late 40s. Hands worn, voice gentle. People in town liked Lyndon because he didn't ask questions. He listened more than he spoke, and when he spoke, it meant something. That day, business was slow. Just a few tourists passing through, a couple buying apples from the farmer next door. Lyndon didn't mind. The stillness suited him, until he heard shouting. It came from across the gas station nearby, sharp and mean, slicing through the calm like broken glass. "You think this is my problem? You and your kid? Don't follow me anymore, I'm done." Lyndon looked up. A man in a pressed shirt and shiny shoes, clearly not from around here, was stomping toward a black car. Behind him, a woman stood frozen. Her brown hair stuck to her cheeks from tears and heat. She clutched a little girl to her side like she was shielding her from a hurricane. The girl sat in a battered wheelchair, legs thin and unmoving, eyes wide but dry. She didn't cry. She just stared, like she had seen this all before. The man drove off, tires kicking up dust. No one else moved. But Lyndon did. He didn't rush. He just walked, steady and certain, like the earth itself had told him to go. The woman looked up, startled. "We're fine," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. "We'll figure something out." Lyndon looked at her, then at the girl. He knelt in front of the wheelchair, pulling a soft cloth from his pocket, the same one he used to brush wood shavings off his furniture, and gently wiped a bit of sweat from the girl's brow. "I'm Lyndon," he said. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl blinked. "Juno," she whispered. "That's a strong name," he said, then turned to the woman. "And you?" "Faye," she replied. "We don't need help." "Maybe," Lyndon said. "But help's still here." Faye hesitated. She was tired, bone-deep tired. Not just from the heat or the shouting, but from years of holding everything together with paper clips and hope. Lyndon stood. "I live just 10 minutes up the road. Small, place, quiet. There's an extra room and a swing under a big maple tree. You can stay the night, or as long as you need to figure out your next step." She stared at him. "Why would you offer that? You don't even know us." He shrugged. "Maybe I don't need to. Sometimes you just know what's right." Faye looked down at Juno, who nodded quietly. That tiny nod broke something loose inside Faye, a dam she didn't know was holding. "Okay," she whispered. "Just okay." The road to Lyndon's house wound through a patch of tall trees and golden fields. His truck rattled, old but steady, like everything about him. When they arrived, the sun was lowering behind the trees, casting golden light across the front porch. The house was simple, a bit worn, like its owner, but well-loved. Out back, a big maple tree stood tall and wide, its branches swaying slightly in the breeze. A wooden swing hung from the sturdiest limb, gently moving in, the wind like it had been waiting for someone to return. Juno saw it and whispered, It looks like a story. Lyndon smiled. It's been quiet for a long time. I think it's ready for new stories. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and fresh bread. Faye ran her fingers across a photo frame on the mantel, a little girl with a crooked grin, holding a harmonica. She was mine, Lyndon said quietly. Her name was Willow. Faye didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She knew that kind of silence. That night, they ate soup Lyndon had frozen weeks ago. Simple food, shared warmth, and something else that couldn't be named yet. After Juno was asleep, Faye stood on the porch beside Lyndon. The stars blinked above them, quiet and sure. You didn't have to do this, she said. No, he replied. But I think I did. Anyway, Faye looked toward the tree. Feels like the kind of place people grow back into themselves. Lyndon nodded. It does that. And for the first time in a long while, they let the silence wrap around them. Not empty, but full. Full of what might come next. Mornings in Windmere Bay always arrived gently. The air was cooler now, and the light came through the maple leaves in soft patches, like sunlit lace on the ground. It had been 3 days since Faye and Juno arrived at Lyndon's home, but it already felt like something had shifted in the space between the walls. Lyndon had always woken before sunrise, out, of habit more than need, but now he found himself lingering in the kitchen just a bit longer, making extra toast, boiling 2 more eggs, and setting out the blue mug, even though no one had claimed it yet. Faye would appear soon after, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but her shoulders looking a little less tense each morning. She never asked for much, just coffee, quiet, and enough peace to figure out what came next. But Juno was different. She rose quietly, like a thought forming, and wheeled herself out to the backyard where the maple tree stood tall. She said very little. In fact, most of her days passed in near silence except for the sound of pencils scratching paper. She sketched constantly, on napkins, old receipts, even the side of the cereal box once. Her drawings weren't just good for a child her age. They were full of something else, feeling, mood, soul. She captured the way the shadows bent beneath the maple tree, the way Lyndon's boots leaned near the door, the quiet curve of her mother's frown softening when she laughed. She didn't talk much, but somehow she said more than most people. One afternoon, while Lyndon was fixing a broken cabinet hinge, Juno rolled beside him and held out a sheet of paper. He wiped his hands on his pants and took it carefully. It was a drawing of the swing under the maple tree, but not empty, like it was in real life. In the picture, Juno was on the swing, her legs strong and extended midair. Faye stood nearby, smiling, and Lyndon sat on the porch holding a mug in his hands, watching them. He blinked. That's beautiful, he said softly. Juno didn't answer. She just looked at him with those steady eyes and gave the tiniest nod. Later that night, Lyndon sat alone on the porch holding the drawing in his lap. The moonlight made the pencil lines glow faintly. He felt something stirring deep in his chest, something like grief but also like comfort. Willow had been a quiet girl too. She didn't like noise or crowds. She had used her harmonica to say what words couldn't. When she passed, the silence she left behind was loud and hollow, but Juno's silence was different. Hers was full. Faye noticed it too, how Juno's face softened when Lyndon was around, how she leaned forward in her wheelchair when he spoke, like she was listening not just to his words, but to the spaces between them. One morning, Faye sat on the porch step beside Lyndon and watched Juno sketch under the tree. She hasn't drawn this much since... She hesitated. Since before things got really hard. Lyndon didn't press her to finish. He didn't know how to love her. She continued quietly. Her father. When she stopped walking, he started seeing her as something broken. A weight. Lyndon frowned. She's not a weight. No, Faye said almost to herself. She's light. She's just quiet light. They sat in silence for a while. "She reminds me of my daughter," Lyndon said at last. "Not because she can't walk, but because of the way she feels the world." Faye looked at him then. Really looked. "You lost her?" He nodded once. 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Me too." There wasn't much else to say, and that was okay. Some stories don't need to be told in full to be understood. The next day, Lyndon surprised Juno with something special. He had built her a wooden easel from spare pieces of walnut. Nothing fancy, just sturdy and smooth, with a little shelf for her pencils and paper. He didn't present it with a grand gesture. He just rolled it out under the maple tree and said, "Thought this might make things easier." Juno touched the wood with reverence. Then for the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled wide. Not polite, not small. A real smile. One that reached her eyes and sat there, beaming. Faye wiped away a tear before anyone could notice. That night during dinner, Juno handed Lyndon another drawing. This one was of the house. She had captured every detail: porch railing, mailbox, even the slightly tilted weather vane on the roof. But in the picture, a small wooden sign hung from the porch beam. It read, "Home." Lyndon stared at it for a long time. "She sees more than we think," he whispered. Faye nodded. "She always has." And for the first time in a long while, Lyndon felt something settle inside him. Not sadness, not grief. Something gentler. Something like beginning again. The wind in Windmere Bay had a special way of carrying things. Scents, sounds, and sometimes even answers. It had been 2 quiet weeks since Faye and Juno arrived at Lyndon's home. What started as a temporary stay now felt more like a rhythm. Days began with toast and tea, followed by long hours under the maple tree, where Juno's drawings seemed to multiply like flowers after rain. Lyndon had never been one for company. But somehow this felt right. Easy. Even the silence was different now. It wasn't lonely. It was shared. One sunny morning, a small letter arrived in the mail. It was addressed to Faye, written in tidy handwriting on cream-colored paper. Lyndon handed it to her over breakfast, his brow slightly raised. Faye opened it slowly. Her eyes skimmed the words once. Then again. "What is it?" Lyndon asked gently. "It's from the Windmere Arts Council," she said. "They're hosting a children's art showcase next month in the city. Someone must have seen one of Juno's drawings. Maybe the woman at the library who helped us scan them." Lyndon leaned forward. "They want her to be part of it?" Faye nodded. "They've invited her to display her work. And there's a scholarship for children with disabilities. It covers art supplies, workshops, everything." She looked stunned. Not thrilled. Not terrified. Just overwhelmed. Lyndon spoke carefully. "What does Juno think?" "I haven't told her yet," Faye said. "I don't know if it's too much. She's never even been outside Windmere. She gets overwhelmed easily, crowds, new places. But she draws what she feels," Lyndon said, "and people feel it back. Maybe she's ready to be seen." Faye bit her lip. "You really think so?" Lyndon nodded. "I do." That evening, as the sun melted over the treetops, Faye told Juno about the invitation. She didn't speak at first, just listened, eyes wide. Then she picked up her sketchbook and drew a small picture, a smiling girl standing in front of 3 tall windows. Inside the windows hung paintings, hers. In the corner, she added a figure sitting on a wooden chair. Lyndon. She looked up and gave a single nod. That was her yes. The next 2 weeks moved in soft, hopeful chaos. Faye helped Juno choose which drawings to bring. Lyndon built a travel case for the artwork and repaired the old truck's radio so they could play music on the drive. Juno was unusually quiet the day before the trip. She sat beneath the maple tree, sketching something she wouldn't let anyone see. "Want help packing?" Lyndon asked gently. She shook her head. "You nervous?" She gave a tiny shrug. Lyndon crouched beside her. "You know, Willow used to hum whenever she was nervous. said it helped her feel bigger than her fear. Juno tilted her head. Did it work? He smiled. Every time. That night, Juno hummed softly in her sleep. The drive to the city took just under 3 hours. To Juno, it felt like stepping onto another planet. So many cars. So many lights. The buildings looked like they were trying to touch the sky. But she didn't panic. She held her sketchbook tightly in her lap and looked out the window with curiosity, not fear. Faye reached back from the front seat. You okay? Juno nodded. I want to see my picture on a wall. At the gallery, the air smelled like fresh paint and paper. The staff greeted them warmly, guiding them through a hallway lined with children's artwork. Juno's space was near the center. Her chosen piece, a pencil drawing of the maple tree with 3 figures beneath it, hung proudly in a simple white frame. The tag below read, "The Place Where We Stayed" by Juno Nolan, age 6. Faye blinked fast to hold back tears. Lyndon just stood there, hands in his pockets, heart louder than his words. Visitors stopped. Some stared in silence. Others smiled, softly nodding, moved by something they couldn't quite name. One woman whispered, "This feels like home." A boy pointed to Juno's name and said, "That's the girl who draws with feelings." Juno sat quietly in her chair, watching, absorbing. Then slowly she smiled. After the event, they sat on a bench outside the gallery. The sun was beginning to set, and the breeze had returned, gentle and full. "I'm proud of you," Faye said, brushing Juno's hair from her forehead. Lyndon nodded. "You didn't just show your art. You shared your heart." Juno looked up at the sky. It felt like the wind was watching me. That night, back at the hotel, Lyndon found a small envelope, slipped under the door. Inside was a card from one of the gallery curators. It read, "Juno's work reminded us that home isn't always a place, it's a feeling. We'd like to invite her to submit more pieces to our traveling exhibit, Quiet Voices. Her vision speaks, loudly. Thank you for letting her share it with the world." Lyndon looked up, eyes wet. Faye stood nearby, holding Juno close. "Did something happen?" she asked. Lyndon handed her the card. She read it, then looked at him. "Do you think this is all too much too soon?" He shook his head slowly. "I think this is exactly where she's meant to be." Outside, the breeze picked up again, tugging gently at the hotel curtains. And if you listened closely, it almost sounded like the leaves of a maple tree whispering their approval from miles away. They came home on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that didn't ask for anything, just a bit of silence and somewhere soft to land. The dirt road that led to Lyndon's house looked just the same. The field of tall grass still waved in the breeze. The old mailbox leaned a little to the left, like it had been waiting in its own way too. As the truck rolled to a stop, Juno leaned her face against the window and smiled. "We're back," she whispered. Faye opened her door and stepped out. First, she paused, breathing in the familiar air. It smelled like wood smoke, apple blossoms, and something else. Belonging. Lyndon walked around and gently lifted Juno from the back seat. She held her sketchbook tight against her chest as if it were her most precious thing. "It's still here," she said, looking at the maple tree in the backyard. "It never left," Lyndon replied. The days that followed were calm, filled with small things that made life feel full. Juno set up her easel under the tree again, her drawings richer and more colorful than ever. She started painting in bold colors now, not just pencil lines, blues, golds, reds. Her silence was still there, but now it came with a new kind of glow. Faye began planting flowers around the porch, lavender, marigolds, and a few wild sunflowers that grew however they pleased. Her laughter came easier now. It rang through the rooms like music you didn't know you missed until you heard it again. Lyndon built shelves in Juno's room for her art supplies. He fixed the wobbly porch step and oiled the swing so it moved without a creak. He didn't say much, but his actions told a louder story. One of someone who had made space in his world and wanted them to stay. One evening, Faye stood beside him as they watched Juno draw. This place, it feels like it waited for us. Lyndon looked at her. Maybe it did. One morning, Juno placed a new drawing on the kitchen table. It showed the three of them beneath the maple tree, just like before. But this time there was a fourth figure, a small child with curly hair, holding a balloon shaped like a heart. Faye froze. Her hand went to her stomach, then to Lyndon's arm. He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "I was going to tell you soon," she whispered. "I just found out." Lyndon blinked, then smiled so softly it looked like it came from somewhere deeper than words. "I think the tree knew," Juno said, swinging her legs slowly. They laughed, not the loud, bursting kind, the warm, teary kind that feels like home. As the months passed, Lyndon's house became something new, not just a shelter but a home built on second chances. He and Faye didn't rush anything. There were no big declarations, just a quiet agreement that love could grow slowly and still be real. Juno continued drawing. Her pictures now lined the walls like a museum of feelings. There were no perfect lines, no rules. Just life, captured through the eyes of a child who had learned to see the beauty in stillness. In late spring, the town invited Juno to speak at a local school event. The same girl who once used silence to protect herself now used it to speak, through art, through expression, through presence. Lyndon watched from the back of the room, hand resting lightly on Faye's. He didn't need to be in the spotlight. Watching was enough. Being part of her story, being part of their story, was enough. One evening, just before sunset, they all sat under the maple tree. The swing moved in slow rhythm. The sky above was painted in soft streaks of pink and orange. Juno looked up from her drawing. "Do you think things always work out like this?" Lyndon thought for a moment. "No," he said, "but sometimes if you're really lucky, the broken parts fit together in a new way, and it ends up better than you expected." Faye smiled. "It's not about fixing everything, it's about choosing to stay." Juno nodded. "I think the tree understands." The wind rustled through the leaves as if in agreement. That night, Lyndon sat on the porch long after the others had gone to bed. He held a cup of tea, staring at the swing and the tree behind it. The stars blinked above, and the breeze wrapped around him like a quiet hug. He thought of Willow, his daughter who had once filled this place with song and laughter. He still missed her every day. But now, the ache had softened. The silence wasn't empty anymore. He looked at the sketchbook Juno had left on the porch bench. On the open page was a simple drawing, 4 chairs under the maple tree, all filled. Above them, a single word floated like a whisper. Home. Lyndon smiled. The tree had waited, and now it was full again.